There are 5 myths about Israel and the war in Gaza that I would like to address.
The smooth-talking, almost hypnotic horseman of new atheism, Sam Harris has gone full genocidal on Palestinians. In an episode of his Making Sense podcast, he made an argument endorsing and legitimizing the current Israeli bombardment of Gaza, rather than frame the conflict for what it truly is: a conflict of occupation and dispossession and the slow ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Sam Harris decided to frame it as a clash of civilizations in which the Palestinians in Gaza deserve what they're getting because they're not civilized.
This is a larger clash of cultures. I hesitate to follow Samuel Huntington in calling it a clash of civilizations.
But one cannot expect Sam Harris to be reasonable. He has shown time and time again that he cannot be trusted to be reasonable. For example, he had previously called for Trump to be punished for a crime he hadn't yet committed, or that Joe Biden's son could literally have thousands of dead babies in his basement, and it wouldn't matter if the alternative to Joe Biden was Trump.
I don't care what's in Hunter Biden's. I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared. Whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right, or China, it is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in.
Yeah, that guy. That guy had the gall to call Palestinians uncivilized. Harris titled his podcast episode 5 Myths About the War in Gaza, and knowing Sam's views on Islam, it seems predictable where he's going to go with those supposed myths. I'll cover those myths in a separate video, but in this video, I'll only cover the introduction as there is enough in it to pick apart. The first thing Sam Harris does is to enlarge the scope of the conflict and introduce other parties or characters to make it seem like it's something bigger than it actually is, to make it into something that it's not.
2 things I should say at the outset that are important and easy to lose sight of, with the various pseudo-moral hallucinations being spread everywhere, in particular on social media. The first point is that the problem that Israel faces with Hamas, and eventually Hezbollah, and ultimately Iran, while it is existential for Israel and dangerous and difficult in many specific ways, is a variant of a larger problem that has nothing in principle to do with Israel or Jews or American foreign policy. This is a larger clash of cultures, and this clash is happening in varying degrees in 100 countries. In most places, it can be described as a conflict between Islamic extremists, more appropriately called jihadists, and ordinary human beings struggling to maintain the norms of open societies.
Introduces Hezbollah and Iran as players in the conflict, so that it's not just about the Palestinians and their struggle to shake off the boots of Israeli oppression. It's about a clash of cultures in which a backward Islamic culture being pushed by the Palestinians, Iran, Hezbollah, and Islamists all over the world and wanting to destroy ordinary human beings struggling to maintain an open society. While it is true that there are Islamists causing problems in many countries across the globe, my own country included, that fact is tertiary to the root of the problem between Israel and the Palestinians. The existence of jihadism and its stated goal of ushering in an Islamic caliphate does not negate the actual cause of the conflict in Palestine. This is the problem of correlation versus causation. In Sam's view, Islamic intolerance for any other culture or worldview is the cause of the conflict, while in actuality, it's not. Islamic intolerance is an incidental point in this conflict. Sam Harris wants us to believe that it's because Arabs simply hate Jews. Sam is forgetting that prior to 1948, Jews lived relatively peaceful in the Arab world amongst Muslims for centuries. While as a minority in the Arab world, Jews would have faced some challenges. They were found in every level of society and government in the Arab world. The Arab world did not have a problem of anti-Semitism. Europe did. The Arab world did not attempt to systematically exterminate its Jewish population. Europe did. Sam Harris discounts Israeli occupation and American foreign policy as having any role to do in the conflict.
The problem that Israel faces with Hamas, and eventually Hezbollah, and ultimately Iran, while it is existential for Israel and dangerous and difficult in many specific ways, is a variant of a larger problem that has nothing in principle to do with Israel or Jews or American foreign policy.
This is the problem with many Westerners and their chauvinistic ignorance. To look at a conflict and say it has nothing to do with the fact that close to 1 million Arabs were kicked off their homes in 1948 by the Zionist state created on their land. And it has nothing to do with how Israel has occupied the West Bank and Gaza since 1967. That it has nothing to do with how the US has given Israel a blank check to act the way it wants to. To look at all these obvious and immediate causes and say, no, that's not it. That's not why these people despise the West and its proxy in the Middle East. It must be because of their lack of civilization. How self-absorbed do you have to be to think in such a manner? Now, don't get me wrong, there is a problem with Islamic fundamentalism, and Muslims have their own share of problematic behaviors to deal with. But you cannot simplistically chalk up the adversarial relationship between Israel and the Palestinians to Islamic fundamentalism when there are more compelling, demonstrable, and evident root causes available. Sam Harris hesitates to even see the Palestinians as humans with a civilization. He says civilization only exists on one side of the conflict, presumably on the Israeli side.
What we mean by civilization at this point in the 21st century exists on only one side of this divide.
And I'm sure he's going to make an argument that such lack of civilization on the part of the Palestinians justifies the murder of civilians by the Israeli military. Sam Harris and his love for dead babies go ahead to say that while war is tragic as it leads to the loss of innocent lives, Israel simply has no choice but to engage in it.
Is that there is no ethical or political argument that makes sense of the sight of lifeless children being pulled from rubble. With just a glimpse of the imagery coming out of Gaza, it's only natural to think that any action that could produce such carnage must be evil. It is absolutely natural to feel that since urban warfare guarantees that innocent children will die, violence cannot be the answer. Right? So Israel should just stop fighting. But this is an illusion. However horrific, even unthinkable, sometimes war is necessary. Of course, many of these strategic and tactical decisions Israel has made in how it wages this war are debatable, but there is no way of waging it without a massive loss of innocent life, as I will discuss. If you doubt that, what is the alternative to violence for Israel in its current conflict with Hamas, given what Hamas did on October 7th?
He asked a very pertinent question. What is the alternative to violence that Israel has? I have an answer to that question, but first I would like to ask Sam Harris that same question on the side of the Palestinians. What is the alternative to violence available for many Palestinians who for 75 years have been living as refugees? What alternative to violence do the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank who have been living under Israeli occupation since 1967 have? What alternative to violence do Palestinians have as Israel continues to brazenly expand its settlements in the West Bank in violation of international law? What alternative to violence do Palestinians who protested peacefully but were shot at by the Israeli military have? What is the alternative to violence that the Palestinians have? Accept the brutal occupation? Accept to be perpetual refugees? Accept that Israel will keep encroaching into its lands? Are these what Sam Harris wants the Palestinians to accept? Would Sam Harris encourage Israel to accept any of these terms and conditions? Now, to answer Sam's question of what are the alternatives to violence, the alternatives are clear. 1. Allow Palestinian refugees to return to their homes in Israel and grant them citizenship. 2. Cease all settlement expansion in the West Bank. 3. Allow the formation of a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders, or better still, formally annex all of the West Bank and Gaza and grant all Palestinians within it Israeli citizenship with equal rights. But we know Israel doesn't want any of these. They want all the lands for themselves to create an ethno-nationalist religious state. The same thing they are accusing Hamas of wanting to do. Sam concludes that pacifism only works against a morally sane adversary, stating that pacifism worked against the British in India because supposedly the British were a morally sane adversary.
What is the alternative to violence for Israel? Pacifism? Pacifism only works against a morally sane adversary. It worked against the British in India.
Really? Is Sam Harris that dumb as to suggest that the British while it ruled India, was a morally sound adversary. The same Britain that caused upwards of 165 million Indian deaths. The same Britain that stole trillions of dollars worth of wealth from India in just 40 years. That Britain was morally sane? Sam Harris is not sane. I can tell you that for a fact. Britain got out of India not because of any moral qualms over Gandhi's non-violent struggle. They did so because the empire was crumbling and they couldn't hold it together anymore. Not after two devastating world wars. The question then should be, would the Israelis end their occupation if the Palestinians practiced pacifism? And the clear answer to that is no. The evidence of this can be seen in the West Bank, which has no Hamas, in which Palestinians are not attacking Israel, but yet Israel continues to occupy and expand settlements in the West Bank. There is a real temptation to ignore the legitimate concerns of the Palestinians because they're Muslim or because of the horrendous acts of Hamas. But I refuse to give in to that temptation when I know that human lives are at stake. I refuse to accept that conditions that Palestinians have been subjected to for 75 years, and while I don't condone violence, I will forever support their internationally backed rights to resist occupation.
So that's the video. If you like what we do on this channel, consider becoming a channel member or patron. However, your likes, shares, and views are just as valued.